With Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, I have a chance to win $500 for being selected as contestant of the game, plus another $500 for every Orioles homer, and $5,000 for every...
Grand Slam-a-lama-ding-dong!
Make the right call to play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery.
Good morning, Baltimore. It is Monday, April 27th, and welcome into the latest episode of the Early Birds Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. And Sam, it's going to feel like a lot of deja vu for the two of us today because, unfortunately, as we sat down to record Sunday night, did not realize that our laptop that we had connected to our cameras completely lost Wi-Fi and we lost everything. So we're going to have to do a couple of repeats here, but we wanted to get the Ravens segment of this episode out this morning. So after all that, Sam, how you doing?
This feels kind of like a rite of passage as a podcaster. I don't know, how long have you been doing this? 2 months, almost 3 months. And it feels like the kind of thing that you have to go through every once in a while. That's just the life of working in podcasting. And we were bound to completely lose an episode at one point or another. Because we had this sort of almost happen with one episode. We lost audio on like half an episode. But yeah, it turned out to be okay on that front. We didn't lose that much. This was our first, we sat down for an hour, recorded an episode, and poof, it was gone. So, yeah, gonna be some deja vu.
Yeah, extremely deflating feeling, but mostly just frustrated for our listeners who obviously are counting on our episodes to come out early every Monday and Thursday morning. So we apologize for that, but we are going to be here talking Ravens today, and we will do a full episode hitting on Orioles. I know Ravens has taken the forefront of our coverage here over the last week or so with the draft, but we're going to wrap that, put a bow on that today, and then really be able to turn the page and do a lot of Orioles talk next episode. So looking forward to that with the Orioles wrapping up their homestand later this week. Now, we wanted to
interesting too, mind you.
The
NFL draft
no
has
doubt
taken a lot of our coverage, but it's been quite a couple days in Birdland.
No, 100%. A crazy series against the Red Sox, and certainly they have a lot of work to do to move their way up the standings. So we'll unpack all of that and more on Thursday. But today, we want to talk about superlatives of the Ravens 2026 NFL draft class. They draft 11 players. Sam is in Owings Mills for the entire weekend, covering the entire thing. Eric DeCosta, Jesse Minter all speaking, and we already had an episode to go ahead and check that out on draft night when they drafted Vanga Awane with the number 14th pick overall. Sam and Josh were joined by our fellow Ravens reporter, Brian Wacker, to talk about that. So if you haven't checked that out already, go ahead and pull up our YouTube, Spotify, our podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and go check that out. They had a lot of fun talking about the pick from at the Castle. But we're going to go ahead and look at this draft class as a whole. Like I said, do some superlatives. So without further ado, Sam, let's go ahead and get started with the best pick. And there's no surprise here. We're both on the same page.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. They go with Vanga Ioane, the guard out of Penn State. I think in a lot of ways he symbolizes, and Jesse Minter acknowledged that he set, quote unquote, kind of set the tone for the draft class of what they wanted to be. He's big, he's physical, he's exactly what the Ravens want to get back to in terms of they're spending sort of this offseason and with the new staff trying to get back to their roots of being a big physical, violent team, and that's exactly what they're getting in Vanga Ioane. We were all a little bit surprised just to see the way the board fell, right? Because the Ravens, I think, when you were looking at mock drafts, when you were looking at that number 14 pick, that quote-unquote sweet spot, you start to wonder who's going to be available of like the top, because Eric DeCosta had talked about 15 guys, a half of the first round draft being a ton of talent, and then it really dropping off in the second half of the first round. So at 14, you're thinking you're going to get the last of the litter of that top tier 1, tier 2 of talent. And board fell in a surprising but helpful way for the Ravens, where they had their pick, because Vanga Ioane going into the draft was the guy who they wanted, would be available, and would make sense. At 14, he ends up being the guy they wanted, but they made a decision to take over violent, disruptive edge rusher Ruben Bain, supposed to be one of the better edge rushers in the class, and then also tight end Kenyon Sadiq, which was another route, if they didn't go offensive line, thought to be what they could do with that first round pick. But ultimately shows it was the biggest need. It was the one they needed to address, and it was made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's the best pick because it fills a massive void for this team. The interior offensive line has been a major question mark, both at the guard and center positions. And with Owane, who is a true bull in the middle of that offensive line, somebody who is going to be able to step in immediately and lock down a position of need, it just checks all the boxes. And that's exactly why he was mocked to them across the board. So it's a no-brainer pick, even with Ruben Bain and Kenyon Sadiq there. It just makes too much sense for what they needed as a team, but also the caliber of talent they were getting as a player at 14. It's good value regardless, even though it is not necessarily a premium position. But when you have such a glaring need as you do, and the fit is so good, you can move that kind of team building ideology aside for a moment and just go ahead and check off the box you need to check off.
Can we talk about getting a chance to meet Wenger Ioane on Zoom shortly after the pick, and then him arriving the next day? One, that is a massive human being. Makes Eric DeCosta, Jesse Minter, and Declan Doyle look pretty small. At least O-line coach Dwayne Ledford was there on, I guess that was Friday early evening, and at least he looks like he's, about close to the same size Wenger. But yeah, Wenger's a big guy, and then so we got a chance to spend a few minutes asking questions on Zoom, and then had a press conference the following day, and he's got this really I think I used just the term stone cold killer on the pod Thursday night, because I'm not sure there's a better way to describe someone who is so fiery and intense, but he'll deadpan and not really show any facial expression. If you look at the picture of Ioane when he posed with his, first round pick jersey, Ravens jersey, next to Jesse Minter and Eric DeCosta, he's not smiling, he's not showing any emotion, and he's a really nice guy. He is he's a little bit of a teddy bear in the sense that, like, he's super friendly, and I wouldn't call him necessarily outgoing, but he's super friendly and engaging, but he's also going to say things like, no one's going to stand in front of me and survive. No one's going to touch my quarterback when I'm out there. Like, I want to kill somebody when I'm on the field, and he's deadpanning all of this. So that's exactly what we want to hear from an offensive lineman. Ravens fans really had a hard time last year. I mean, they had a hard time watching Lamar Jackson get sacked 36 times in 13 games, understandably so. It was the biggest point of frustration, and the Ravens understandably used the first round pick on, as you said, fixing their biggest area of need. And I think we mentioned this on our Lost in the Annals of History podcast, but Ravens fans never really learned how to say Daniel Falele properly. I'm hoping that they'll learn how to say Olai Vaivenga Ioane with some relative consistency, because there's a chance he could be here for a while. I mean, he was drawing comparisons to Haloti Ngata.
Yeah, Sam's been practicing that in the mirror over and over again just to get it right for you guys. So definitely
You're not
recognize
totally
that
wrong.
All right, biggest reach, and I swear we don't agree on any other superlatives the whole rest of the way, but we are on the same page here, and that is wide receiver Jacoby Lane, who the Ravens took in the third round, a guy who on most mock drafts and rankings was projected to be a fourth or fifth round pick, but they go for Lane, the big-bodied receiver out of USC, who ton of touchdowns, certainly can go up and get it, and that's exactly what this Ravens team needs, but a bit of an unpolished player.
I think the thing they really love about him most is he has bigger hands than any pass catcher Lamar was throwing to in 2025. His hands are over 10 inches from the end of his thumb to the edge of his pinky.
And he likes to use just one a lot. A lot of one-handed catches.
Exactly. He's taller than anyone else, than any of the returning receivers on Baltimore's roster. He weighs more than any of the receivers on Baltimore's roster. The thing about all those stats is it's not saying a lot. He has the intangibles and the traits and the archetype of being the big-bodied X-receiver that Lamar Jackson hasn't really had or been able to utilize throughout his career. But the knock on him, and the reason, as you mentioned, that there were a lot of prognosticators who thought he's probably more of a day 3 pick, is because his numbers in terms of getting separation on routes is subpar, and his ability to overpower a defensive back, his physicality in route running, is not where it needs to be for the NFL level. Granted, a lot of his success came because his catch radius is ridiculous. Because if you throw the ball near him and he can get a hand close to the ball, he's probably going to come down with it. So you're sort of weighing those two things and looking at the latter and saying that can be the reason that we can take care of the rest. We can get him ready at the NFL level. There's an argument to be made that he was at a Power 5 program with all the resources to get him to that level. Why couldn't he do it in college? Why can the Ravens do it? It's a very fair argument. It's a very fair point. But if the Ravens can round out that side of his game, then this, in retrospect, becomes a really good pick. But it's a reach because those knocks, there were probably other receivers. And I know you feel like Elliott Surratt should have been, that you could have swapped those picks. And oh, sorry. Thank you. Elijah Surratt. That's the problem about having 11 names to try to remember. You're bound to mess up one or two. I spent too much time trying to remember Olai Vaivenga Ioane that I forgot Elijah Surratt's first
Tunnel
name.
vision.
Exactly. But I know, you had made the point, or you were thinking that if you switch Elijah Surratt and Jacoby Lane, like that's a fair draft that no one's going to bat an eye at, which I think has its merit because Elijah played with Fernando Mendoza and just won a national championship. But yeah, Jacoby Lane, there are understandable knocks, but it's a reach in the sense that you're not totally sure that he could be that guy right away.
Yeah, the thing that the tape kind of bears with Lane is will he be able to get out of sticky man coverage? Because that is where he has really struggled with big physical corners. Being the big physical guy that he is, it's exactly the type of one-on-one matchups that you want a guy like that to be able to win, to be the true X on the outside. You got to be able to create your own separation. And, he's able to go up and get it, certainly. But when you have a guy draped all over you, it makes it a whole lot more difficult. And he's already somebody who isn't bringing a whole lot to the table from a yak perspective. 3.8 yards after the catch average per reception in college. So certainly, not what you're going to be expecting from him as a receiver is someone who takes the ball and runs with it. But if you can use him in the red zone situations where, you wanted DeAndre Hopkins to thrive last year and maybe being able to expand his route tree a little bit, there's certainly a lot to like about him as a player. But for him to be a true, number one type receiver, which is obviously the goal of any receiver coming out of college, there's a lot to do in the particularly the man coverage aspect.
Quick Jacoby Lane story before we move on. He was actually mentored and coached and has a really good relationship with legendary Ravens tight end Todd Heap. And Jacoby Lane was on his 30 visit. He was sitting in Eric DeCosta's office and he called Todd Heap. They were talking about that connection, and he's like, actually, let me give him a call right now. So he tries to FaceTime Todd Heap, and Eric DeCosta's sitting back, and Jacoby pulls out his phone. Eric DeCosta's thinking to himself, this is kind of a litmus test for whether or not Jacoby's BSing me, or if Todd Heap, if they have the relationship that he's touting, or we'll kind of see how this goes. And after like a ring or two, Todd Heap picked up right away. It was like, hey man, how's it going? So that put a smile on Eric DeCosta's face, and Jacoby Lane is like, you'll never guess who I'm with. And he turns the phone around, he shows Eric DeCosta, and then the three of them all had a big laugh in his office. But that's all to say that Eric DeCosta did have conversations with Todd Heap. Surely he had conversations with others too about Jacoby Lane, but that former player, well-respected player in the organization, giving that kind of confidence in a pick like that means a lot to Eric DeCosta and to those in the war room. So that was a big part of the reason they felt so confident taking Jacoby Lane. And then, of course, they just see so much value in his upside.
So far we've done best pick and biggest reach. Next up here is what could come back to haunt them the most. And this isn't necessarily a specific pick, but just a development that occurred from the weekend at the NFL draft. Sam, what stood out to you most?
Yeah, mine sort of ties to that Jacoby Lane pick, actually, because the obvious answer here is that they didn't draft a center. That was the interior offensive line was the biggest area of need, and they addressed it with a guard, but replacing Tyler Linderbaum, maybe more specifically, was probably the biggest thing they had to do, and they didn't. And you're not going to spend a first-round pick on a center. So it was at least
unless he's Tyler Linderbaum.
Unless he's Tyler Linderbaum. But excuse me, I should say in this draft class, you were not going to spend a first-round pick.
Yeah.
There was not a first-round center in this class. So they were looking second and third round, more specifically, at centers, but Eric DeCosta had said there were on their draft board come the second round, there were two centers left on their board who they felt like could be starters on day one. There were two guys left. It was Iowa's Logan Jones and Florida's Jake Slaughter. And this was after they picked Zion Young. So they're sort of in the late 40s, getting close to that 50 pick. And Eric DeCosta's thinking, do I want to trade up into the late second round to make our third pick a center? And then they go guard, they go edge rusher, and then they go center, and they really beef up the trenches. And I'd written in you can go read my 5 things we learned from the draft on the BaltimoreSun.com. I'd written that this had a chance to become the beef up the trenches draft. This could have been the first 3-4 picks are all address the trenches, which is something that Eric DeCosta talked about on Thursday night after they draft Ioane. He says, we haven't done enough to address the trenches in the past few years. We feel like this is a real adjustment on that strategy. We feel really happy with the ability to put so much capital in a first-round pick and doing that. And then he did the complete opposite the next 2 days and didn't draft another anyone else in the trenches until late day 3. But that's all to say that he did consider a trade. He was looking at trading up from 80, which is where they took Jacoby Lane, to around that late 50s, early 60 mark to maybe get Logan Jones or Jake Slaughter, and realized that he sort of weighed the decision of probably have to give up 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, 5th round pick, or a team might come calling for 2027 first. And he just didn't see the value in making that heavy. He didn't see the value in giving up that much for a day one center. All the other centers on the board they could have gone for, but Eric DeCosta and company felt like none of those guys are week 1 starters, and they have 3 guys on the roster already who are in that same tier. So that wouldn't have made a lot of sense to go elsewhere, which you can understand, but it was something they considered, and it just didn't go through. So I think coming out of this draft without a center is certainly the thing that could come back to haunt them the most if they don't have anyone. If they're looking at Corey Bullock, the UDFA out of Maryland, Jovan Gwynn, who came from Atlanta with Dwayne Letford, and Danny Pinter, who came from Indianapolis. They have a combined 2 to 3 career starts, and all of them are Danny Pinters. None of them have played a lot of time at center. So this is a chance that almost trade has a chance to come back and haunt them.
Yeah, no doubt. When you come into this draft with so many clear needs, and I think that the Ravens really did check off a lot of boxes with this draft, not just getting Ioane in the first round, but kind of getting some Isaiah Likely type replacements, getting a Charlie Kohler replacement, getting a new punter, going down the list of guys who, another edge rusher. I mean, a lot of things that we were kind of identifying coming to this draft, they were able to check off a lot of different boxes, but center with Tyler Linderbaum departing was almost, if not just as glaring as the guard hole. And for them to walk out of this draft without any kind of solution at that spot certainly puts pressure on them the rest of the offseason to try and figure something out, and I think that, with those guys that you mentioned, Corey Bullock and the rest, the fact that Eric DeCosta was so seriously considering moving up into the second round, I think tells you everything you need to know about what the Ravens think about their current center options. They are certainly going to need to go out and get somebody a little bit more proven for that position just to go into camp. And whether that is maybe a post-June cut situation, or, they go for a low-end free agent here over the next couple of months, we will see. But it's going to be one of those things as that we go through, OTAs and the rest of the offseason here. It might be a bit of an unsettled spot. Maybe they use that to get a closer look at some of the guys they have in-house before making a serious decision on whether to bring in somebody externally. But at the same time, this is a very unproven group, and you have a new offensive coordinator coming in, trying to establish a lot of new things. You'd like to get your center quarterback relationship down as quickly as possible. So certainly something that could come back to haunt them, both in the short and long term. My side of this superlative here is passing on Ruben Bain. Now, I had already said that Ioane was a great pick, and I do believe that they made the right pick at that spot. But the fact that Ruben Bain was still available, really not expected to be at 14. If you really are going off of best player available on your draft board, Ruben Bain's got to be higher than Ioane. I'm sorry, but he just is. He is probably a tier above in terms of being in a true top 10 pick of this class. And that he was still available at 14 shows the Ravens aren't necessarily going for, no stops. We're taking best player available. they're taking positional fit into it as well. But for Bain, who is a true home wrecker, somebody who would have really given them opposite Trey Hendrickson a dominant pass rush, perhaps the best in the division, maybe one of the best in the AFC. Really would have liked to see what that would have looked like. I mean, it's something to dream on for sure. And Bain, who has some question marks, don't get me wrong. We talked about his shorter arms, but he's also just really a power rusher, true power rusher, who doesn't have necessarily a ton of other moves to get around guys. But he can line up on the interior, he can line up on the edge. He's a versatile player and somebody who brings a ton of fire and energy to a defense. I'm very interested to see what he does at the NFL level. And like I said, I think they made the right choice, but if we are looking at Ruben Bain as one of the best edge rushers in the NFL over the next 5 years, I think there will be some second guessing there at the Castle over that pick.
Matt, our listeners already have to worry about what Max Crosby is going to be doing over the next year or two. They're already going to be hoping that that Eric DeCosta read Max Crosby's medicals correctly. They're going to be hoping that he's not that good in 2026 and beyond. Now they have another edge rusher to worry about. And
we're just watching edge rushers across the NFL that aren't on the Ravens. That's the whole Ravens experience.
Ruben Bain is coming to M&T Bank Stadium in 2026. That will be an interesting storyline to follow when he comes. And I think at the end of the day, like you can reasonably say maybe both teams got it right. The Bucs and the Ravens got it right because the Ravens filled an important position of need. And it can be a little bit hard to compare the two positions just because they're so different. But if both of them are really good, then it's just a matter, it's a subjective thing. But if Wenger doesn't work out, Ruben Bain is excellent, then yeah, there's going to be a lot of criticism on this pick, and we'll know that maybe in a couple of years. The Ravens ultimately talked about this. I think it's the consensus belief they made the right decision because they went for a surefire positional fix on the offensive line instead of the shiny new toy was dangled in front of Eric DeCosta's face. And he didn't go for it. So kudos to him because Ruben Bain, a little bit more of a risky play. Of course, there's so much of the discourse about his arms, widely believed that won't matter because he's so technically sound and violent off the edge. But credit to Eric DeCosta for not going after the shiny toy when he was available because it was really surprising to get to 14 and there was the joke leading up to the week of the draft was that Ruben Bain's going to fall into their lap. And he did. But the guy who they also were supposed to take from the jump also was there at 14. So it is an interesting hypothetical. And we had talked about this when we fake recorded yesterday. But it's interesting to wonder about the alternative if they take Ruben Bain in the first round and then let's say they take Zion Young in the second round and they trade up from 80, they go up 35 or so picks, they go up, that would be about 20, like 20 or so picks, and they take either Logan Jones or Jake Slaughter, and you end up with a situation where your defensive line or your edge rushers are Trey Hendrickson, Ruben Bain, and Mike Green, and Tavius Robinson, and your offensive line is Ronnie Stanley, and Roger Rosengarten at tackle. Your guards are Emory Jones Jr. and John Simpson, and your center is either Logan Jones or Jake Slaughter, a guy who you feel confident coming in week one. It's interesting just to postulate about which would you prefer, and obviously that changes the entirety of the rest of the draft. In that case, the Ravens don't also have Jacoby Lane or Elijah Surratt. What they do with Hibner and Cuevas and that sort of run of four pass catchers, and that all changes. But it is an interesting hypothetical to wonder about how that offensive line looks very different. But at the end of the day, I think if you're the Ravens, you're happy to have a guy like Wenger, a mauler at guard, and someone who you can count on to protect Lamar Jackson for the next few years.
Yeah, picks aren't made in a vacuum, and at the end of the day, they made the pick that made the most sense for their team and kind of took the draft from there. And I don't think you can fault anybody for that. I think it's a good process. So all I'm saying is it's something that we could be talking about in a couple of years, or perhaps even sooner, if things don't go the way that the Ravens are hoping. Now
we don't know when the games. Real quick, man, we don't know when the games are, but we're definitely going to be talking about it the week that Tampa Bay comes to Baltimore.
Oh no, 100%. Best value. I'm going to go ahead and start and take my guy, Elijah Surratt here. And like you said earlier, if the Ravens had just made their 2 wide receiver picks in reverse order, I don't think we would have had any problem with it. Surratt, coming out of Indiana, was widely projected to be about a third round pick in this draft, while Lane was projected for more fourth or fifth round. And Surratt, another guy who is a bit of a possession receiver, can move the chains, really good hands, can go up and get it in traffic, and somebody who I've watched very closely over the years is he went to my alma mater, JMU. Under Curt Cignetti, his sophomore year, just absolutely exploded onto the scene with the Dukes, had his highest yardage total of his college career, almost 1,200 yards, and then goes over to Indiana, wins a national championship. Obviously, that chemistry with Fernando Mendoza was awesome, but it was time and after time again, him making these spectacular grabs in really clutch situations, particularly several come to mind here late in games to keep their perfect season alive. And what a run it was. But Elijah Surratt is somebody who I think is exactly the kind of receiver I was hoping that the Ravens would go and get. I think he fits this need perfectly. And, between him and Lane, double-digit touchdowns totals for both of them last year. I think that tells you everything you need to know about what the Ravens were looking for in receivers. They want touchdowns, and that's exactly the kind of players that they got in Surratt and Lane. But for Surratt, I love the value, getting him all the way down in the fourth round, 115. I think that he slipped way too far and is somebody who is going to, I'm already calling my shot, play well above his draft spot.
Love it. Love it. And this sort of run of 2 receivers tells us a lot. I mean, we learned a lot sort of in totality about this new coaching staff and the direction of the coaching staff, as much as we've heard Jesse Minter tout this new idea of the new age of playing like a Raven. He hasn't really told us anything about what that means or what that looks like. And the 2 things we learned are one, they're getting bigger, faster, and stronger, which is more than anything just kind of getting back to their roots as part of this new age, new era. But the other thing is we're learning about Declan Doyle's offense. Declan Doyle has only spoken publicly 3 times: at his introductory press conference, at the jersey reveal, and then talking about Venga Ioane. And the things we know about his offense are it's going to be, as his players have said, quote unquote, electric. And Declan Doyle wants to chase explosive plays. In week 18 against the Steelers, in that fourth quarter, Lamar Jackson completed 6 of 8 passes for over 170 yards, and he threw a 50-yard touchdown to Zay Flowers, and he threw a 64-yard touchdown to Zay Flowers. On two touchdown drives on 3 possessions. We know how the third one ended. But that fourth quarter by Lamar, I think, is a lot of what Declan Doyle... I think Declan Doyle is far more intrigued by that side of Lamar Jackson. Those were Lamar's 2, by a good chunk, his 2 longest touchdown passes of the season. And it seems that that's what Declan Doyle's more interested in by the Ravens getting 2 ex-receivers, 2 guys who can supposedly go up and get it. And they see a lot of value in going back-to-back on those, whether it's you hit on both or you hit on at least one to round out, say, Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Tez Walker, whatever that wide receiver room looks like. But if you're the Ravens, you're hoping Jacoby Lane can be your go route, go get it, and that Elijah Surratt can be he's played a lot of outside at Indiana. Eric DeCosta had said they're similar, but they're not identical as like the big bodied X receivers, but that Elijah Surratt would be probably more inside, like a power slot kind of guy. And suddenly you have, if they are what they think they can be, then suddenly the options at Lamar Jackson's disposal look a lot different than they have in the past couple of years. Ravens have not historically been amazing at drafting wide receivers. So pump the brakes. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But what they can be, and you talk about what we saw from them in college, if that translates, then Lamar Jackson's going to be a happy camper.
Yeah, we talked about this when we were talking about Jordan Tyson, but of how big of a need that this Ravens team had for pass catching, particularly big-bodied guys. This draft class wasn't really great for going and getting that at the 14th pick. You would have made a bit of a reach there, and obviously, like we've talked about, they had other needs. But for them to go and spend, both of these picks here on Surratt and Jacoby Lane, it shows how much they needed it. And I think this was a perfect way to use draft capital to address this position, get two guys in there who are going to be really similar players and are going to be competing for similar role. Tez Walker certainly has to look over his shoulder now as that kind of guy who is currently slotted in as a starter. But I love the way that this kind of shook out for them, and very interested to see how the two of them try to carve out roles in this offense with Declan Doyle, who, as you talked about, they want explosive, they want big plays. It certainly is the MO that comes from his time in Chicago. So I love what they did here, and I'm a big fan of Surratt, and I'm very interested to see, like I said, how he fits into this offense.
I had said earlier that this was almost the let's build the trenches draft for the Ravens, and I think what it really turned into was let's help Lamar Jackson. The let's help Lamar Jackson draft with getting a big offensive lineman, getting 4 pass catchers. They really showed that they're committed to helping put more around him in whatever way possible.
This season, Fast Play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery has a whole new prize. Players who enter the Contestant of the Game promotion will have a chance to win a VIP game day experience, including $2,000 for being selected, premium seat access, and more. Please play responsibly.
So my best value, I'm gonna sort of crunch these two together.
Speaking of more help around him.
That's right. Crunch these two together a little bit with my best value, and then our next superlative is the most noteworthy anecdote. So mine was in the 5th round. Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti was able to make his first pick. The guy's owned the team for 20 years, and he's for over 20 years, and for that time he's always been very hands off about football operations. Specifically, it's part of the reason we don't hear him talk very much, because football's not his expertise, and he leaves the football to the experts, but he is there to help with final say stuff, and he's there to help when he can, but ultimately decisions like this are not his to make. Ravens brass in Jupiter, Florida this offseason, and he says he's quote unquote was begging Eric DeCosta for a pick, and sweetened the pot with a nice top shelf bottle of wine. And Eric DeCosta said, "Yes, Steve." So the Ravens owner of the team asked for a pick. You're going to give the owner of the team a pick. And
hard to say no to your boss.
Exactly. In a non-scientific way, they allow him to make the last pick of the 5th round, which presumably was like this pick still kind of matters, but it's not a throwaway 6th round, 7th round. We're going to let our scouts.
Also, really one of their back-to-back picks, so they were able to have DeCosta take a pick and then Bisciotti right after.
That's exactly right. That's right. So, to Bisciotti's credit, he did his homework. He talked to people. He watched a ton of tape, and whatever his mini board looked like for a late 5th round, he ended up choosing Clemson wide receiver turned running back, Adam Randall. The reason I put him for best value is because he has the potential to be, the way people talk about him is like the way people talk about Kyle Hamilton on defense. The jackknife, the chess piece. He can do a lot. He can play all over the field. And Adam Randall was a receiver for the first 3 years of his college career. And then going into his senior year, Dabo Swinney asked him if he wanted to switch positions. They make him a running back, and he ran for 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. So I'm not saying he's a Derrick Henry replacement, but he's the same height as Derrick Henry, and he's also 230 pounds. So he can be, I think Derrick Henry's closer to 250. So he's not Derrick Henry. He's definitely not Derrick Henry. He's a 5th round pick, but he is a hulking figure who can do different things, play different positions, can be versatile, catch passes, he can block, he can run the ball. I'm not saying that he's going to be a big part of this team in 2026, but for a 5th round pick that your owner's making, that you were willing to say, we are comfortable conceding this pick to someone outside of our internal scouts and our general manager, they might have gotten a good one.
Yeah, it's certainly, you look at just this list of picks for the Ravens in this draft, it is one that kind of stands out as going against what their overall team building philosophy is here. I mean, not that they were going to be getting a starting center in the fifth round, but maybe they could have taken somebody who could have developed into a center. Maybe they take a defensive tackle, which they end up waiting until the seventh round, taking Rayshon Benny out of Michigan. It doesn't exactly check a box for them in terms of need, but a really intriguing player for Adam Randall, who, like you said, really good with the hands, being a receiver turned running back, and somebody who can be deployed a lot of different ways. Certainly a very different player from what Derrick Henry is. So there is a way for both of them to share the field if that is the way things shake out, whether it's two running back sets or you bring Randall in as a third down type back in passing situations. And then, maybe down the line he gets developed into a guy who can take the reins from Derrick Henry, who is certainly not showing any signs of aging just yet, but it has to be coming for him at some point.
Or at the very least, maybe he becomes part of a 2-3 running back set who can just be a bulldozer out of the backfield that complements your speedy guy. Like, whoever that becomes next, whether that's Rasheen Ali is here in a couple of years, and he's sort of your he's like what they call Sonic. He's like the Sonic and Knuckles. He's like the Sonic of, and Adam Randall becomes Knuckles. Like these are things to think about. Maybe he's the bruiser third down back.
Yeah, and somebody who, I'm comfortable passing the ball to over the middle, whereas Rasheen Ali, I'm setting him up a swing pass to get to the outside as opposed to, having him try to break any tackles. So
maybe Devin can have some fun with him in that offense, yeah.
Right. Like pass catching backs, I think a lot of people like to dress them up as one specific type. They catch passes and they run. That's not necessarily what Adam Randall is a bit of a different type of pass catching back, but one that I think can be deployed in interesting ways. So we will see how that works. Like you said, we kind of just rolled right into our next thing here, and that was most noteworthy anecdote. So I'm going to give mine. And that was Eric DeCosta's comments on special teams coach Randy Brown, who they said they've created a monster in Randy Brown, who's been with the organization for, I believe, 23 years now, and overseen a lot of success on the special teams side with kickers, obviously getting all pros out of Justin Tucker at the kicking position and Jordan Stout at punter. They have a clear need for punter, and he goes to Eric DeCosta and says Ryan Eckley, punter out of Michigan State, is the guy. He is the one that we need to get. Eric DeCosta wouldn't let him pick exactly when they were going to be taking Eckley, but he did say, okay, if Brown says this is the guy, then this is the guy. And they go ahead and take him in the 6th round, 211th overall, to be their starting punter and take over for Stout, who departed for New York, coming off of a spectacular season at the punter position. So immediately, like we said, this draft really checked a lot of boxes, and punter was one of them, even if it's something that maybe you could have filled through an undrafted free agent or maybe just a veteran free agent out there. They go for a guy who they see with a lot of upside at that position and now have on a contract very cheap for the next few years.
Punter kicker is the one sort of area on a football roster that if a coach or scout or someone comes to Eric DeCosta and says, I really like this guy, I think we should take him, every other position, he'll do his due diligence, he'll watch tape, he'll come to his own conclusions. Punter kicker is the one where if Randy Brown comes to him and says, this is the best guy in the class, this is the guy we need to draft, Eric DeCosta will say, sounds good. He will not let Randy Brown influence when that pick might happen, because Randy might try to go a little higher, but he is willing to he's willing to put that kind of trust in Randy Brown. Ravens are the first team to take a punter or kicker. They take Eckley, and Randy Brown was very happy. They feel really confident in him. The only knock on Eckley is that his hang time is not NFL caliber. So, hey, they developed Jordan Stout into an All-Pro. Probably do the same with Eckley. He's certainly got the boot and the swagger to he's got the bravado. He's celebrating whatever. I think he'll be a fun addition.
Yeah, booming leg for sure, can kick it a long way. And between him and Tyler Loop, they've got probably the youngest punter kicker duo in the NFL. And in terms of cap flexibility, neither of them signed to any kind of big deal. So those two positions not taking virtually any space up on your payroll right now, which is important as well. As you have to pay top dollar for kickers and even some punters these days, as we've seen across the league. So they got both those guys on young deals, and two guys who they are hoping can step up next year as young players and be very much regular contributors for this team. So we will see how that goes on special teams. Next category here is most, if they can develop him, then he'll be a stud pick. And Sam, you went with a guy who we definitely need to be talking about a little bit more here, second round pick, Zion Young.
Yeah, the thing about Zion Young is he is, to go back to what we were saying about Vanga, like he kind of fits that mold of getting bigger, tougher, faster, stronger, what the Ravens wanted to get out of this draft class and spend this offseason doing. He is bigger than Trey Hendrickson and Mike Green. He's more of like a Tavius Robinson build. So the knock on him, and they think he's a first round talent, but the knock on him is that Zion Young is more of a set the edge guy. His priorities are on first and second down. That's where he's gonna be at his best. He's not gonna get double digit sacks as a rookie. Hold on, I'm taking out my AirPods because they just died. This is always good podcasting, but I hope you can still hear me. So Zion Young is the kind of guy who I don't think he's going to come in and, like, again, he's going to complement Trey Hendrickson, because Trey Hendrickson's not the run stuffer. He's not as good of an edge setter. That was the whole discourse when the Max Crosby trade falls through, is that is the part of Max Crosby's game that Trey Hendrickson does not have. This is where they feel like Zion Young can be that complement. And the Ravens now are investing 2 back-to-back second-round picks in fixing a pass rush group that for 2 years in a row was the best in the league, and in 2025 was one of the worst. So it's clear they're willing to make that investment to address what was the other side of the line of scrimmage, and invest real capital in it. I think that he has all the intangibles to get to that level. It's just a matter of, and he's also willing to learn. He came in, he's like, I'm a sponge, I'm coachable, I can't wait. He's a self-proclaimed hellraiser. So it'll be fun to watch. Be interesting to see if they can develop him, because I think he's got all the tools and all the traits, and certainly the size. Maybe there's that sort of a Dafe Owe trajectory, who's now making $100 million in Washington right now, where he struggles to bring down the quarterback and finish sacks early in his career, and he develops into a guy that can get double-digit sacks. If he can be on that trajectory, Zion Young could be a really good edge rusher for a long time in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's almost the same if you look at what we were talking about with the pass catchers, and how 2 guys who are kind of similar type players are going to be competing for snaps on the offensive side of the ball. I think we're going to be seeing that a little bit on the defensive side of the ball as well, with Young and Mike Green, who are going to be competing for snaps behind Tavius Robinson and Trey Hendrickson in terms of being the outside linebacking pass rushing edges for this team. And bit different skill sets for sure, but guys who both were second round picks, both have a lot of potential to be guys who can get after the quarterback. Young maybe more of a run stopper than a straight edge rusher, but at the same time, very interested to see what those 2 young guys can do in this defense, and guys who could learn from Trey Hendrickson as well, watching the way he goes about his business and the type of player that he is on the edge. So both big projects when they were drafted, being second round picks, that tends to happen. But at the same time, I think there's a lot to like about Young's game. So certainly as someone, if they can develop him, he could become a true asset for this defense, and give them, they don't have Ruben Bain, but maybe, they can have Ruben Bain by committee between Mike Green and Zion Young.
Yeah, they pass on an edge rusher in the first round and they address it the second round. You're not getting, I think they saw, hey, we're not going to get a top 2 or 3 edge rusher to come off the board in this draft. We don't need to do it in the first round. We can wait till the second round. Matt, who is your most, if they can develop him, then he'll be a stud, and then we can kind of wrap up here?
Yeah, my guy is Matthew Hibner, a guy who actually grew up one town over from me. He's from Burke, Virginia. I'm from Fairfax Station, and a tight end who, isn't necessarily standout player by any single traits, isn't somebody who is getting a lot of big break tackles over the middle, but he is someone who puts up solid numbers as a pass catching tight end, can make plays a little bit over the middle of the field, but also a solid blocker as well. Maybe not a super violent finisher, but somebody who can at least hold his own on that edge, which is going to be important as a number 2 tight end in this offense. But, if you're looking for a potential Mark Andrews succession plan, I don't know that Hibner is a true, standout pass catching tight end who is going to be putting up Mark Andrews numbers. That's a very small group of players who are capable of doing that, but certainly somebody who in this offense that Declan Doyle, we're expecting him to run with a lot of 2 tight end sets, as had been done both in Chicago, but also in Denver with Sean Payton. I think that he is a great great kind of trial run here as somebody who could kind of fill in the Isaiah Likely role. Maybe not right away, but certainly develop into that guy. I think there are a lot of traits to like about him, and certainly with the layout of this offense, there's opportunity for him to kind of take that role and run, even if it doesn't happen in year one.
Yeah, they get Durham Smythe as your third tight end. He's your main blocking tight end, and he's going to fill that Charlie Kohler role. And Matthew Hibner sees himself, quote unquote, as an Isaiah Likely type. So this is what they did in 2022. They drafted tight ends on day 2 and day 3 or day 3 tight ends to try to supplement Mark Andrews, and they're trying again and hope they can hit on a guy like Matthew Hibner, as you said.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap there. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties here on this episode. We were really hoping to get a full draft recap for y'all, but hope we were able to hit on all of the main points for you guys. And like you said, we'll be back on Thursday with Orioles Talk. It'll finally be back. Don't worry. Sam, any final words for the good people?
Just bummed that we lost an hour of podcasting, and happy we were able to do this again and spend some more time talking the draft and go through this again. It was fun.
Yeah, it was just an excuse for me to talk to you again.
I'll take it.
All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a good one.